Hi guys, we're here for our weekly Facebook Live question and answer, and today the question is, when and why should you school your horse in the show pen? So we're going to dive into kind of what is schooling, why it's appropriate, when you want to do it, when you don't want to do it, and answer any other questions that you have as we go along. So you are welcome to, if you're live with us, to leave your comments and questions, and we'll try to get to them while we're live. If you're watching the replay, we'll try to get to them afterwards, kind of circle back, make sure that all of your questions get answered. If you have a suggestion for a future live, for a question that you have or a topic, you can send that in to us at our email, which is hazekofalph@gmail.com. Or you can just send us a message wherever you're watching this, whether you're on Facebook or Instagram or on YouTube. Okay, so the question today is when and why your horse needs schooling in the show pen. And before we get any further than that, can you explain what schooling is so that people understand that? Because some people don't understand what it means to be schooling in the show pen.
So when we school our show horses, and every discipline has some form of it, we want to make sure those horses are confident, comfortable, ready to go show. So in the reiners, we have an event that is one specific horse out in the arena. So when we school on them, the biggest thing is making them do patterns and making them pay attention to us when they're all by themselves and there's all the other horses are at the gate. If you're schooling, let's say Western pleasure horses, you're schooling them for horses being around you in the traffic, whatever. You're trying to simulate a show without all the pressure that you put on them when you show them hard. You're trying to simulate everything that's going to happen, the banners, the judges, the announcers, the warm-up going in.
The fringe on your chaps.
So that they're comfortable when they go show. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, like, some people will have the question of, like, are you allowed to do that in the show pen? Like, are you, like, so sometimes you might go in to school your horse, like, intentionally to school, not to show. You might, if you're riding one-handed, you might go to two hands to school, or you might, intentionally go off pattern to school, just to get your horse, like you said, paying attention to you and kind of staying honest and confident and comfortable in the show pen. So I know a lot of people will say, are you allowed to do that? Are the judges okay with that? Or is the show okay with you schooling? And can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
I think every show is different. If you have a show that doesn't allow schooling, they're going to tell you that. So if you go in and start to school, and usually what that involves is, if it's a show and they know it's going to go till 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. We've been at a few shows a couple of years ago. Was it Michigan?
Yeah, there was one at Michigan where they said no schooling. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so if you purposely went off pattern, you purposely two hands, they just said, okay. It was going ridiculously late. It was what it was.
Yeah.
I don't feel like if you do it properly, any judge ever has a problem. And by properly, I mean, I don't want to take more than the allotted time that I would have in a regular pattern, first and foremost. Mm-hmm. When we see somebody and they're loping 20 circles and they're just going to it, at that point, you're wasting time. And the judges are sitting there just shaking their head. If you go in and do the same amount of circles...
It's getting the next person kind of mixed up. If you go in and your horse, let's say, does something wrong, so you decide to go two-handed, let's say, and finish your pattern two-handed, I think that, you've taken up the same amount of time as if you were showing a pattern. The person who's in next is still ready with the same amount of time. It's quite a respectful way of doing it. If you go in and you add a whole bunch of circles to your pattern and now you're taking extra time, and now the person who's going in after you doesn't know what you're doing for your pattern, so they don't know how to get their horse ready to go in next, That's
And I think it's just very disrespectful to everybody.
disrespectful. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen trainers sit at the gate and tell people, like their customers, to keep going until they kick you out. Well,
Yeah.
that's pretty disrespectful.
That's really disrespectful. Yeah.
Some things that I do to try to be somewhat respectful to the judges, if I'm schooling, depends where it's at. If it's in a men's and ladies class and there's 3 guys and there's $100 at it, I'll stay on pattern. I'll do one-handed. If I know I'm going to,
Because you want that $100.
well, I'm still cheap.
We're not losing $100.
But you can still school on them while you.
Yeah, there's
are
I
in the
guess there's a
pen.
lot of different ways to school. You can stay on pattern and stay one-handed in school.
Right. If I know I'm going to go two-handed, as a courtesy to the judge, if I know I'm going to, I will walk in, purposely go two-handed right at the beginning, say thank you very much to the judge, and then just do my deal. I think they appreciate it. I've been told that numerous times where it's, then they don't have to be judging. They don't have to be mentally focused on you. They know you're just out there to school. That's fine. One of the reasons this kind of got brought up was last weekend we went to a quarter horse show. Some of the horses we schooled on. A lot of people say, well, why'd you take them to a horse show to school on them? Because there's no other way to get those horses in the pen for the first time. We don't go in for the first time to run them hard. We don't run them down to stop. We don't run them to go do anything. We want them just to go lope around. They're going to be scared. Those babies are going to be scared. So when we school on the babies, it's all about, you just keep loping. You're all right. If we school on an old horse, it might be, hey, they're starting to maybe push on us a little bit. They're maybe starting to know that they're going to run. So we're going to pull on them a little bit and bring them back in the bridle. Maybe even like one horse I did on the weekend, he went through and he pushed on me a little bit. So I just backed him from a lope right into a walk and just went, hey, remember, I'm still up here and I'm still in control. It's so good for their brains, and it's so important that we keep those horses showing over the long term so that they have a job, they have a purpose, and they can stay in the show pen and be taken care of. So the schooling is just so valuable. That's kind of off topic. You need to stay focused.
I think it's good because I think the questions that we had last weekend were like, why would you bring babies to school at a show? And also, as open riders, like, why are you not showing to win? Like, there was a few times where we both went in intentionally to school client horses, not just babies, client horses that had been through the pen a few times. And I think there's like some expectation, like, Jess Colfell's riding my horse now. Let's see what it can really do. And the intent of the trainer taking the client's horse in is not to go and, in this case, wasn't to go and like win the world show. It was to go in and make that horse be better for when the non-pro goes in next. So making them wait at center a little bit more, straightening them up through the center line, making them wait on their rundowns, like any of those things. And I know it's confusing for a lot of people because they're like, well, I know Jess Colfell can do a lot faster rundown than that. Why is he not running down as fast as he can? Well, that's not the purpose of that class. That's not the reason why he took that horse in that class. It was to make that horse listen better for the next time that the non-pro takes it in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's no guarantees, but that's the idea behind it.
And there's some horses. I remember when I was just starting to do reining horses, I read an article, and it was Bob Loomis and Bob Avila, and they were talking about schooling horses. And at that time, nobody on the East Coast really schooled horses. They didn't have reiners that lasted a long time. But in the West Coast, all the money was in the aged horses and the older horses. And Bob Avila made a comment that he schools one 3 times for every time he shows one hard. And that's not to say you can't show one more than 1 out of 3 times, but we're talking at a very high level. And with the reiners especially, I remember we'd school on pleasure horses too, but the reiners are hard because we want them to run fast, hit the ground hard, spin hard, come out and lope off relaxed like they're a pleasure horse. And that's the trick with the reiners, is that they have to be able to go up and down that scale of intensity when we want it to. And other events, they still school, but they can get away with certain things. Like, let's say a barrel horse can get away with holding their faces while they're running them. So if a horse is a little bit shaky in the chute, they don't worry as much. They're still going to school on them, but not as much. In our deal, we can't, we don't want to touch their face as much. We don't want to be on them. So we have to school them a little bit different ways. And I think for us, like what a lot of people don't realize is before we take one and show them hard, let's say at a fraternity or a derby or shows that we need them to be at, I will take them to friends' places. I will take them to show grounds. I will take them to club shows so that they are set up for that. And it's so important for those horses' longevity. I think when the first time in the pen they walk out of that pen where they go, man, this was easy. I could do this every day of my life. Instead of if we show them hard the first time, they walk out going, oh my God, this is horrible. Like I got to run my wheels off. Mm-hmm. And it's so important for the longevity for whether they go to be a non-pro horse or even an open horse. But knowing that show pen is a nice place, it's a happy place. And it's hard on them young horses because they get out there by themselves. They're scared. They react differently. And that's, you can train them all at home to do all the maneuvers, but you also have to train them in public. And I always, with customers, I always use the thing. It's like the kids.
They pull different stuff at a restaurant than they do at home.
Sure. If they're not paying attention when they're at Walmart, that's when it counts. So when we're...
And you have to fix that at Walmart. You can't fix that at home. You have to, Same with people. The riders. Riders do different stuff in the warm-up pen, do different stuff in the show pen and different stuff when people are watching them ride than they do at home. Riders need schooling classes just as much as...
I was going to say just as much. Or if they want to try something a little different, maybe they want to, stop a little different or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the time you do it in a schooling class.
Yeah.
And then you can get the confidence for when you want to run them a little faster. I think one of the misconceptions, too, when we school them is, or for me at least, like some people go in and just lope slow. And I think that's important on them young horses. You just lope slow. But when I school on an aged horse, an older horse, and I did one on the weekend, I would start to speed them up. And I would purposely, stand up and go, you're going to run. And then I would back them off a little bit.
Right back down where
and I think, in each rundown, I think I had 4 different speeds going fast, slow. But that's what it's for.
Yeah.
Getting back to the thing about, is it allowed? I think one of the reasons that if you do it respectfully, it's okay. Every one of those judges has, hopefully, shown a reiner. At the quarter horse, we don't have that luxury because, it might be a pleasure horse trainer, whatever. But they've shown horses. If you're judging, you've likely showed these things. They know the difficulties in doing one. They know the difficulties in maintaining one and keeping one at peak. So as long as you school respectfully, they're going to be respectful to you also, I think.
Yeah. And
it's always been that way with me. I mean, there's been some times where judges came up to talk about it. I've had it where judges came up and asked me, okay, why did you do that? And it wasn't being rude as a judge to a trainer, but it was just as horse people will have those talks.
Yeah.
And, especially at the NRHA level, when you school on a horse in like a men's and ladies class, they know why you're there. They appreciate it.
Okay, so I know somebody is going to be like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, and why am I not having my trainer school my horse for me before I go in? And I think there are a few times when it's actually not advantageous to be schooling. the first one that kind of comes to mind is if you are showing for the very first time or one of the very first times and your nerves are super high and you've kind of got yourself psyched up to go show, and at the last minute you're kind of backing out and you're like, oh, will you show it, will you show it, will you show it? That doesn't usually work better. Usually it works better for the rider to kind of stick with it and push
even
through.
if you simplify the pattern or simplify it,
yeah,
the more you can get the person in there.
The more you can get the person in the pen. And I think even in terms of schooling, not in the show pen, but in the warm-up pen, if somebody wants their trainer to get on and school the horse a little bit in the warm-up pen before they go into show, a lot of times that's not to the rider's advantage, because they got their show clothes on, they're ready, they're warmed up, they're thinking about their pattern, they're riding their horse. To then pull them off and have them stand there and watch, a lot of times that just makes the nerves go kind of haywire, to have the trainer on there riding, and then for the rider to get back on and have to go, and then their horse feels a little bit different because the trainer's kind of tuned on it a little bit. A lot of times that's not an advantage. That's not a time that's advantageous to the rider. It might be a little bit to the horse, but not to the rider, for the trainer to get on and do some schooling. Sometimes it is once you get a little bit further along, if we need to, kind of get something specific through to the horse, or if the trainer and the rider have had a lot of switching on and off and the rider's kind of used to getting on after the trainer's been on, then it can be really effective. But I would say you don't want to use it as a crutch or use it as an excuse not to ride and not to do the things yourself. That's a tricky thing with it. It can get very quickly where people want their trainer to do all of it,
Yeah, you still have to do it.
You still got to do it.
I think the easiest way to describe it, that people understand the most when we school, it's the same as like exhibition games for any other sport, whether it be hockey or whatever. You can do all the drills at home. You can do all that stuff. You don't know how a horse or a person will react 100% until you put them in the pen. And, that's the biggest thing. The one thing I see, though, where people school wrong, let's say they, we will rent facilities, show facilities, and we will go there. And we don't do it all the time, but we try to as much as we can. You have to make it be like a show. Meaning, like, I hate it if we pay paid warm-ups at a horse show and that show does not have an announcer. Yeah. We'll have people go sit out in the judges' chairs. I tell a lot of my customers, put your chaps and hat on.
Chaps on anyways. Yeah.
Warm them up just like you are, especially those old show horses that they've been through this deal 100 times. Have somebody do your tail. Have somebody, the same routine you would have going into the show pen is what I want to set up for those old horses especially. I'm not saying I always wear my chaps when I'm schooling. Sometimes people steal my chaps. But you try to do it as so close to the show as possible, so that the horse understands this is how this gig goes. And the other one that we will do quite often, let's say somebody hasn't shown in a while, that's really beneficial is, does your hat still fit? Does your chap still fit? Does your new show saddle
it's a
work?
Schooling class just as much for the rider as it is for the horse.
Sure. People will all of a sudden put show pads underneath their saddle with their regular pads. It doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
Anything that you can do to mimic the game day deal is going to set that horse and rider up for a better success.
Is your shirt going to stay tucked in? Is your belt buckle going to stay done up? All the things.
There's a lot of stuff that can happen.
Yeah.
So you want to check it all. And I think if you do it right, the judges appreciate, you can't go in there and rip on their faces or kick them real hard or do whatever, but you can go in there and kick them a little bit. You can go in there and pull on them a little bit to a respectful level. Everybody's cool with it. I think that's the biggest thing. Respectful as far as pulling on the horses and being respectful that way, respectful of everybody's time, judges, show managers, other competitors, being respectful there. And other ways we school on them too, I think that we didn't talk about, like we talk about the paid warm-up ideas, is sometimes if somebody goes in, let's say one of our customer goes in and it's a walk-in pattern with turns, and let's say they do 5 turns. The deal I tell everybody is you keep showing. You think you've done 5 spins, I don't care. You keep showing. But as a coach, I'm also watching the scribe, and 99% of the time I can tell if they're writing down a 0 because they've done 2 different columns and the judge has a different demeanor to them. And then I'll tell them, go ahead and school on the horses. You've already taken a 0. Now you can go do this. There's lots of ways. I mean, I schooled on one on the weekend. I just put him in the Western riding class. I just put him in a whole different class. And
yeah, and that one I thought was really interesting because that horse was a bit frazzled. And, oh no, sorry, I'm thinking of a different one, not the Western riding class. What I was going to say was there was a horse that you took into school that was a bit frazzled, that was a young horse. And the way that you handled that was very different from how you would handle an older horse who went in and did the same things, physically looked the same way. Like this horse, it got its head up, it got pushing on the bridle, it got fast with its feet, and there was never punishment. You were never
no, because he was
rough
scared
with it. It was all about shaping it, showing it where to go, trying to help it, trying to get it confident. Whereas if an older horse went in the pen and did the same thing, you'd handle it a little bit different. Not saying you'd, get super rough with it, but you would handle it in a different way. It's less about making them comfortable and more about like, hey, you know better.
Well, I think that's something about schooling from the coach or trainer point of view, and that also transfers into people, is how you go about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we do that with some students. Like there's certain students when they're going in the pen, I'll even get them just a little bit mad. And then other students, everything is roses and daisies and everything's nice. That baby on the weekend, he was just scared, so being rough with him isn't going to help him.
Yeah.
As an older horse that maybe, turns the corner and grabs the bridle, you need to just kind of rattle his chain a little bit. And that's knowing the horses, knowing the people. We get asked at shows sometimes, what should I do with my horse in the school? I don't know your horse.
Yeah.
If you're not a customer,
so
I don't know your horse.
That was the other thing I wanted to say when we talked about when it's not appropriate for a trainer to school your horse, when the trainer hasn't been riding it. Like, sometimes people are like, oh, will you take my horse through and show it? Like, no, it's not going to work the way that you think it will. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to the horse. It's not going to work the way that you think it will for one of us to just get on and take your horse through the pen. There has to be a bit of a rapport there. And there has to be enough training that when we do get in there, we know what the horse knows and we know what we can access to get them to pay attention.
I don't know what buttons to push, that's for sure.
Have you ever got on a horse that you didn't know and schooled it at a show?
Yes.
And how did it go?
I
hope it went okay.
Well, I've done it a few times.
Yeah.
A couple of those were unsafe situations.
Mm-hmm. For the owner?
For the owner.
Mm-hmm.
One I can think of, this is going back a few years. This girl was way over-mounted on a horse. A little wee kid. Way over-mounted. And, it was going to be a train wreck, and I just went in there and slowed everything down. And
you'd never ridden the horse before, but you took it through.
I never knew the horse. Mm-hmm. It wasn't as good as if I knew the horse, but it was a dangerous situation. I've done it a few times and I always regret it. Mm-hmm. But if it's an unsafe situation, even if they're not a customer, I don't want anybody to get hurt.
No.
And I mean, if it's dangerous to the point of dangerous for all of us, well then that horse just doesn't need to be at the horse show.
Totally.
But there's the other thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is schooling them for 4 minutes doesn't fix it.
Oh my gosh, no.
You know, you need to do it a few times. You need to do it at home. You need to do it a lot, because horses only learn through repetition. 4 minutes didn't do it. I lope it around a couple circles in the show pen. It ain't going to miraculously be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It'll help, but it ain't going to be great.
Yeah.
And I think people think that when they school, you know, oh, I did it one time.
Excuse me.
You know, I ran down and did a stop one time that worked because I changed it. Wow, it's perfect now. No, it's repetition.
Yeah.
And I think that when you do the paid warm-ups properly, where it's repetition, where, you know, maybe you do the paid warm-up on the first day of the horse show, you pick a men's class or a ladies class, and then you go show. You know, that's different because now you have two and then you work your way up. It's really difficult when we're at a horse show and like you're watching people school and it's all different ways, and you know, like, or somebody says, well, what should I do? You know, if I don't know the horse,
no, that's where there's
him.
a huge advantage to being a client who sticks with a trainer for the long term, because, you know, the better the trainer knows the horse and the better the trainer knows the way that the rider rides, the more intel we have for when we do go in to school your horse. We know the stuff that, you know, you're maybe going to do, you know, that isn't ideal, and we can kind of help set the horse up for success, even if you do that wrong a little bit in the show pen. That there can be quite a lot to it. It's kind of a fascinating thing, really.
Mm-hmm. Because it's training their brain.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Okay, we have taken up a lot of your time already yammering about schooling horses. I hope that answered your questions, and that gives you a little bit more information when you're deciding about whether your horse needs to get schooled on or whether it's time to get some help from a trainer, and also a little bit about when it's appropriate, when it's not, maybe even a little bit about how to do it. That answers all of your questions. We did say today that we were going to talk about a new product that we added to our tack shop. And so the new product, we actually have a whole bunch of new products that we're adding, but a new product that we're adding this week is Sore No More liniment, one of our favorite products that we use at home and at the horse shows. And we do have some in stock. You can find it on our website at reiningtackcanada.com. And if you have not used it before, shoot us a message and we're happy to give you the info on it. There is a good description on our shop. If you have used it before, you know how good it is. You also know that it does test if you are using it at a horse show, so you want to be a little bit careful with that. But we're excited to add another product to the shop that we like and use so much. Good? Okay. Thanks for being here with us, you guys. Send in your questions and we will get those answered for you, and we will see you next week on Thursday at noon.
Have a good day.